that fancy form there.
Okay. Yeah, now we're recording. Apologies we have a little internet, so we're just recording via audio. And it's good that we took a break because a few people just walked in.
So the mic is questionable.
Huh?
And Tevel is for sure
Yeah.
didn't. No, don't
Yeah.
say anything.
Yeah, Tevel is regular untied produce. So we're 26A, Chaf Vav Amud Aleph. Chaf Vav Amud Aleph, 26A.
I know where I am. I'm here over here.
You didn't get to the hard part yet. Dan Rabbanan. En madlikin betevel tameh bechol ve'en tzarich lomar b'Shabbat. You cannot light a candle
I enjoyed that.
with tevel tameh, impure, untithed produce, during the weekday, even during the weekday, and for sure you cannot light it on Shabbat. Meaning, if you cannot light it on the weekday, if tevel tameh, for sure you can't light it using for candle lights on Shabbat. Kayotzebo, similarly, en madlikin beneft lavan bechol. A person cannot light with neft lavan, which derives from pitch,
Or cocaine.
bechol.
I heard it's
Ve'en tzarich lomar b'Shabbat. And you don't need to say, you don't need to mention that obviously you cannot do it b'Shabbat. So says the Gemara, Bishlema neft lavan mipnei she'uaf. I understand the neft, the white neft, because it is she'uaf, it is very much volatile, and the vapors can flare up and take control very easily. About tevel tameh mai ta'ama. Why can't I light with tevel tameh? Amar kera, the pasuk says, Va'ani hineni natati lechat mishmer terumotai. Behold, I given to you, the same pasuk we had yesterday, to safeguard terumotai, my two terumot. Terumotai, in plural. Bishtei terumot hakatuv medaber. The terumot's talking about two things, two different types of terumot. Achat terumat tehora, one terumah tehora, ve'achat terumat teme'ah. And one is terumah that is tameh. So how does this apply to tevel tameh? Ma terumah tehora en lach ba ela mishat harama ve'elach. Okay, just like the case of tahor terumah, which you could eat. You have no right you have no right to eat it until you separate the truma. Okay, and because if you eat it before truma, you're punishable by midei shamayim. We learned that yesterday. After teruma temeah, so too teruma temeah en lach ba ela mishat harama ve'elach. So too teruma that is impure. You have no opportunity. You are not able to burn it, because that's the only thing you can do with terumat temeah. You're not able to burn it, right? Until you actually separate. You tithe it. So before you tithe it is in the concept of tevel. So from the fact that the kohen only can burn terumat temeah after it's removed, it's out of the status of tevel. So when it's in the status of tevel, for sure you can't do even burning it. And that's where the Gemara learns it. Yeah, we're good. Any questions? Yeah. Gufa. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar omen. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, get used to Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. You're going to hear him a lot soon. En madlikin betzori. You cannot light with balsam. Okay, you cannot light with balsam. Yesterday we learned that balsam was something that also flames up very easily. וכן היה רבי שמעון בן אלעזר אומן צורי אינו אלא שרף מעצי הכתף. Tsori is, what is tsori? What is balsam? It's the sap from balsam trees. That's a seraf. Rabbi Ishmael says, Kol hayotze min ha'etz, anything that is extracted from a tree, like sap, en madlikin bo. You cannot use it to light it because the sap doesn't draw easily from the wick. Rabbi Ishmael ben Beroka says, En madlikin ela beyotze min ha'peri. The only thing you are allowed to light with is something that is extracted from a fruit, okay, which basically disqualifies the innards of a fish, or the itran and balsam. Only that comes from a fruit. That's his opinion. Rabbi Tarfon says, En malikin ela b'shemen zayit bilvad. Rabbi Tarfon says you cannot light anything except shemen zayit. So Amad Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says, Araglab, he stood up on his feet, be'amar, and he says, Ma ya'asu anshei Bavel. what are the people of Bavel going to do? She'en lahem ela shem shum shemin. He's basically yelling at Rabbi Tarfon, who only allowed olive oil. So he said, the people of Bavel, who only have sesame oil, what are they going to do? Uma yasu anshe Madai, she'en lahem ela shemen egozim. And what are the people of Madai going to do that only have nut oil from nuts? Uma yasu anshe Alexandria. And what are the people from Alexandria going to do? She'en lahem ela shemen tzedonot. They only have radish oil. And the people of Kamputakia don't have either of all these oils. All they have is neft. But according to you, Rabbi Tarfon, all you can light is olive oil. So what are these people going to do? Ela, therefore, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri says, En lecha ela ma she'amru chachamim. All we have left is what the chachamim said, which is en madlikin. Right? You cannot... So we have what the Chachamim say that we cannot light, the things that we cannot light, which were the things that were mentioned in Mishnah. Umadlikin, but we could light b'shemen dagim ube'itran. But what you could light is with oils from fish innards ube'itran and from itran. Rabbi Shimon Shezuri Omer. Rabbi Shimon Shezuri says malikin b'shemen pakuot uvneft. Right? Shimon ben Shasui says you can light with radish oil and neft. Sumchus Omer, Sumchus says, Kol hayotze min habasar en madlikin bo ela b'shemen dagim. Alright? You cannot light with anything extracted from basar, from flesh, except for fish oil. So says the Gemara, Sumchus hainu tanakama. Sumchus is the same as Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri only allowed the shemen dagim. That's the only thing he allowed. And now Sumchus says you can't do anything except for Shemen Dagim. So aren't they the same opinions? So Ika Benaihu, what is the difference between the opinions of Sumchus and Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri? Ika Benaihu did Rabbenuna Amarav. Way back a few dapim ago, where we learned about the Rabbenuna Amarav Shita, that says if you were to add kosher oil into all these items, whether or not that basically disqualifies the non-kosher oil. So below Mesaime, but we're not able to tell which one of the Tanaim, okay, would say that he agrees that you could allow kosher oil into the non-kosher type, and which one would say that you aren't allowed to add a little bit of the kosher to non-kosher type. So that would be the difference between Sumchus and Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, the Tanakama. That aspect of it. Okay. Good? Yeah, we're good? No responses. Or we're all... yeah? Okay. Fasten your seatbelts. Not because I'm going fast, because it just may be a bit rocky. Tanya Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said, I'm going to go as slow as possible because I'm going to need to look at my notes as well. Kol hayotze min ha'etz. Anything that comes out from a tree, okay, like from a plant or right, en bo mishum shalosh al shalosh, is not subject to the concept of 3 finger breadths, which is this width, 3 finger breadths by 3 finger breadths, to create a garment, a minimum size garment, that be mekabel tum'ah. The minimum size garment, as we're going to see, is according to all the opinions, at least could be considered something, is a garment that is 3 finger breadths by 3 finger breadths. Okay? Once you have a little piece of garment like that, it could technically be mekabel tum'ah. And so the Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says, if it comes from a tree, okay, then anything that comes out of a tree, whether sap or that woolen thing that comes out of whatever, that's not called a garment that would fall into that category of 3 by 3. Therefore, umesachechin bo, you could use it for schach on a sukkah, because you're not allowed to use schach on a sukkah that become mekabel tumah. That's one of the criteria of schach. It cannot be mekabel tumah. So even if you were have a 3 by 3 garment from a tree, since it cannot be mekabel tumah because it doesn't fall in that category, you can be mesachechin bo. Chutz mi pishtan, except from flax, linen. Flax is the only thing which comes from a tree. It's a plant, okay, that if you were to create a 3 by 3 garment, 3 finger breadths by 3 finger breadths garment, it could become tameh. It could be mekabel tuma because it is considered like a garment. Therefore, you cannot use that as schach. All right? Yeah. And also because it grows from the ground. We're talking about things that grows from the ground. That's why you can use it as schach. But right? But flax you cannot do. Amar Abaye. Abaye says, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. We're now on the top of Chaf Vav Amud Bet. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar. Vetana debei Rabbi Ishmael, and a certain Tana in Rabbi Ishmael's yeshiva. I'm just going to refer to him as Rabbi Ishmael, but it was a Tana in Rabbi Ishmael's yeshiva. Amru davar echad. They said one thing. All they said is the same thing. Okay, which the Gemara is about to explain what it is. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar had de Amran. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar is what we just said, that a 3x3 that comes from the ground cannot be mekabel tum'ah unless it's flax. Only flax can be mekabel tum'ah. Had Amran. Tana de Rabbi Ishmael. So what did the Tana of the yeshiva of Rabbi Ishmael say? Maihi, what did he say? The Tane de Rabbi Ishmael. Ho'il vene'emru begadim batorah stam. Since it used the word begadim, okay, in a general term. Let me explain to you what is going on here. This is talking about the parasha of tzaraat, of what we call leprosy, but it may not be leprosy, but the parasha of tzaraat. So the parasha talks about what happens if begadim, clothing, garments, come in contact with tzaraat. So, says the Torah says first, "V'ne'emru begadim b'Torah setam." First, it used the word begadim. Begadim is a general term, clothing, garments. Didn't tell you what type of garments. Didn't tell you if it was cotton or silk or wool. It just said garments. Uparat lecha, okay, but later it specified hakatuv be'achad mehem. Tzemer upishtim. Then the pasuk later says it specifies the type of garment. Tzemer upishtim. Right? Tzemer, either wool or linen. So what's the rule? Right? Kelal uprat. When you have a kelal, which is right, we say in the korbanot every morning. This is what now you understand what we're saying. When you have a kelal is a general term, which is the garments, general term. Uprat, and then you have in the same pasuk or the next pasuk, it specifies the garment, kelal uprat, and bichlal el ma sheba beprat. We are only looking at the prat. The halakha is only following what is in the prat, what is specified. Meaning, the only thing that can become tameh by tzarat is wool and linen. Or linen. Wool or linen. Those are the only two things. So when you have a general term, but then it specifies only wool and linen can become tameh by tzarat. Now, ma lehalan semer upishtim, okay? Just like over there by the case of tzarat, it's tzemer upishtim. Afkol tzemer upishtim. Therefore, any time you see the word begadim in the Torah, it also means wool or linen. That's called binyan av.
It's flax, no?
Wool and flax, yeah. That's called binyan av. One of the other ways that we say, mi binyan av. Binyan av is if I learn a halakha or a rule from one place, like we just did, that beged. At first it said beged, and then it said semer upishtim, and therefore I know that the whole thing's shamat semer upishtim. Therefore, any other time it says beged is the binyan av. It builds up the other one, and therefore all the other places in the Torah where it says beged really means wool or flax. Okay. So again, just by tzarat it's only wool and flax. So too all other places that say begadim, it's when wool and flax. So. When Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says that no other material from a tree is susceptible to tumah besides flax, it's from here. So Abaye says, look, they're saying the same thing. This Tana from Rabbi Ishmael's academy is basically saying the only thing that can be susceptible from tumah okay, is wool and flax, wool or flax. And so too, Abaye says, wool comes from the ground. That's why the Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar only said flax. But he says, you see, they're saying the same thing. They both agree. Only one thing can say, only the flax and the wool can become tameh. Okay, based on this Tanya's binyan up from Tzarat to everywhere else.
Small technical question. We have been translating seven wool or.
Well, we're going to see. Both of them can become tameh, either or. All right, either or. So Abaye says again that Rabbi Ishmael and the Tana Rabbi Ishmael and Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar saying the same thing. Comes Rava and of course argues because Rava and Abaye always argue. Rava says Shelosha al shlosha bishar begadim ika benayu. Now here you're going to have to. This is where it gets confusing. One says shalosh al shalosh. When it says shalosh al shalosh, it's talking about etzbaot, fingers. When it says shlosha al shlosha, it's talking about tefach. Okay, there's another. The next minimum up is a tefach. So Rava says they're arguing in a case, right? In a case of shlosha tefachim by shlosha tefachim. So 3 tefach. A tefach is about 10 centimeters. 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters of all other types of material. So if you have about a foot by a foot of all other types of material, that is where Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar and this Tana of Rabbi Ishmael are arguing. In that case, when you have a foot by foot. Until now, we only said 3 by 3, but in a foot by a foot, they're arguing. The Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar itle. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says that it should apply to render any other garment. Not wool. It doesn't matter if it's wool or flax. He would hold that once you have this measurement, 3 by 3, it's considered a kli and therefore it can be mekabel tuma. L'tanan Rabbi Ishmael leitle. But the Tanan Rabbi Ishmael's yeshiva says, right, he would exclude any other material from wool and flax. Okay? So they're arguing on that. Okay? So now, let's find the source to this. Should I just recap one more time what we're doing and what we're saying? So now, according to Rava, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar is saying that 1 foot by 1 foot, or 30 centimeters, 3 tefach by 3 tefach, okay, it will render other materials, non-wool or non-flax, also tameh. And the Tana Rabbi Ishmael says no, because every other material is excluded. When it says wool and flax, it only meant wool and flax. So let's see the source. Dekule alma mihat. Everybody agrees. Shalosh al shalosh betzemer upishtim mitame benegaim. Everyone agrees that if you have 3 fingers by 3 fingers of wool or flax, that it would become tameh by tzarat. Minalan, how do we know? Detanya, because we learn a beraita, the pasuk says beged. The word in the pasuk says beged, which means a garment. En li ela beged. That only teaches me beged. Shalosh al shalosh minayin. All right, now a garment that is only 3 by 3, a very minimal amount. Where do I know that can also become tameh if it's wool or flax? Talmud lomar veha beged. Right? The pasuk says veha beged. Right? And the beged. So the veha is coming to teach us something extra, because it should have just said beged. So veha comes to teach me that wool and flax 3 by 3 finger breadths becomes tameh too. So the Gemara is asking a question now.
Always question.
Yeah, ve'ema lerabot shlosha al shlosha. Why don't you tell me that veha beged, the veha, is not coming to include the 3 by 3 finger breadths. It's coming to include the 3 by 3 tefachim. Okay? The 3 by 3 tefachim of wool and flax. Not 3 by 3 finger breadths, 3 by 3 wool and flax. Hand breadths. So the Gemara says, Lav kal vachomer hu. The 3x3 handbreadths, okay, we can learn from a kal vachomer. No? That's what we're saying. That's what they're saying. You can learn from a kal vachomer. What's a kal vachomer? The Gemara says, Hashta sheti va'erev. Okay, mitameh. You have the warp and the woof. The warp is the material going down. The woof is going across. It's basically a start to a garment, but it's not really a garment yet. So you see that they crisscross, but they're not a garment. It's the lowest level of a garment. Okay? So, says the Gemara, Hashta shetiva erev mitameh. We make shetiva erev, this nothing garment, but they're just crisscross. We can make it tameh. If it, that's what the pasuk says. Sheti o hasheti o ha'erev, right? That's what the pasuk says. It can become tameh if it touches the tzarat. Shelosha al shlosha mibaye. But now, if you have an actual garment, 3x3, this is fully weaved already. For sure, it's going to become tameh. If the shetin the erev, which is barely holding on, they're just crisscrossed. You're telling me it's tameh, then for sure an actual 3x3 finger breadth garment, okay, is going to be tameh too. All the more so. So now the Gemara asks another obvious question. Ihachi, if that's the case, shalosh al shalosh nami leiti bi kal vachomer. So learn the kal vachomer by 3 finger breadths. Why don't you use the same logic by 3 fingers? The same logic by the kal vachomer. By the 3 finger breadths, meaning saying what? That just like it's tameh with the shetiva erev, which is very weak, okay? Then you have 3 finger breadths, which is a proper garment. You should also make tameh. Use the same logic. Why are you learning the 3x3 finger breadths? Okay, from the word vehabeged. Learn it from a kal vachomer. Yeah? Should we repeat this or no? I'll make it more confused. Up until now, I'll just go quickly. Everyone look in here. Veha beged, until now, veha beged, the veha is teaching me 3x3 fingers. So Gemara says, why doesn't veha beged teach me 3x3 fists? So we said, no, the 3x3 fist is learned from the kal vachomer. What's a kal vachomer? That just like I'm allowed these 4, I can allow the warp and the woof, the shetin, the erev, which is tameh. I can make that tameh. So for sure, the 3x3 handbreadth is tameh. That's a kal vachomer. So Gemara says, okay, if you're going to make the kal vachomer like that the warp and the woof is tameh, the shetin, the erev, then make the kal vachomer, transfer the kal vachomer from that to the 3x3 fingers.
Yeah, but wouldn't it be easy to just say a different kal vachomer altogether?
Like?
If 3x3 is tameh, how much more so the tefach 3 tefachim by 3 tefachim should be tameh? That's much easier kal vachomer.
Yeah. You're right.
In both cases,
Right? I don't understand the whole concept.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense.
I think Tosfot asked that question. Yeah. I think Tosfot asked that question. That basically it's Rabbi Shimon mentioned the smaller measurement for the exceptional case of flax, because flax is susceptible to tumah even if it's only 3x3 finger
Therefore,
breadths.
that would be the only one that's
Yeah.
tameh. Therefore, you cannot use the kal vachomer.
That's why I mentioned the smaller case.
Okay, therefore, you cannot use the kal vachomer.
Yeah.
Okay, makes sense. I guess follow.
All right. So why don't you use the kal vachomer to prove to you that 3 fingers by 3 fingers is tameh? Why are you using the kal vachomer for the 3 tefach? Should be just use it for 3 fingers. He says. The Gemara says no. I'll tell you why. El shlosha al shlosha, because the 3 handbreadths, the foot by foot, the bigger garment, dechazu ben la'ashirim ben la'aniyim, is suitable for both rich people and poor people. Ati bekal vachomer, then we can use that kal vachomer because it is something. It means something. There's value to this garment. Shalosh al shalosh, but when you have this small garment, 3x3 fingers, la'aniyim hu dechazyan, maybe it's good for the poor people. La'ashirim lo chazyan. But this small garment, 3x3 fingers, that is not appropriate for the rich. So therefore, lo ati bekal vachomer, you cannot use the kal vachomer for that because it's even less significant than the sheti and the erev. it's less valuable, it's less important, because only a portion of the people actually use such a small cloth. So you cannot use the kal vachomer from Sheti and Erev, the warp and the wolf, to the finger breadths, because that could even be considered less significant. Ta'ama. So what's the reason why the 3 finger breadths by 3 finger breadths is susceptible to tuma? The katvei kera, because the pasuk says vehabeged. Vehabeged. Ha lo katvei kera, but if it did not write vehabeged, lo gamrin bekal vachomer, we would still not learn the kal vachomer, because it's not a strong kal vachomer, because the 3 by 3 is a very small beged. Okay? So now, right now we are left with the conclusion that conclusion for now, that vehabeged teaches us 3 by 3. A 3 by 3 finger breadths of wool and flax is susceptible to tumah. All right, the Gemara continues. Ve'ema lerabot shlosha al shlosha bishar begadim. Why don't you tell me that the extra letters vehabeged is coming to teach us that a 3 by 3 30 of other garments. We already said that the 3 by 3 of wool and flax is learned from the kal vachomer. Now, maybe the vehabeged is coming to teach me 3 by 3 handbreadths of any other garment, silk, polyester, anything else. Maybe that's what it's coming to tell me, that a 3 by 3 of any other garment is susceptible to ma if it touches the tzarad. Amar Kra, the pasuk says, beged tzemer upishtim. The pasuk actually says beged tzemer upishtim, which implies beged tzemer upishtim in a woolen and a linen garment, yes, are susceptible to tumah. Midya harina lo, but nothing else is susceptible to tumah. Nothing is susceptible, because it specifically said beged tzemer upishtim. Okay, the Gemara continues. Ve'ema ki ma'ut mishalosh al shalosh. So maybe say that when it says tzemer upishtim, when it says wool and linen, wool and flax, that only excludes other garments of 3 by 3 finger breadths. Mishalosh al shalosh, aval shlosha al shlosha mitameh. But maybe 3 by 3 hand breadths can still become tameh. So we just answered, no, it said beged upishtim, that means nothing else. Right? That's what we just answered. So the Gemara is saying, maybe when you say nothing else, it means nothing else 3 by 3 fingers. Maybe 3 by 3 hand breadths is allowed. Okay? Could be susceptible to ma. That's what the Gemara is asking now. Okay? So the Gemara says, no. Trei me'otei ketiv. There's actually part of the Gemara missing here, so I'm going to read. First, bebeged semer or bebeged pishtim. There's 2 times in the Torah in where it says these words. Once it says bebeged semer or bebeged pishtim. All the Balei Koreh now wondering. Now you know why it repeats itself. And then it says bebeged hatsemer or hapishtim. So it mentions twice the garment of wool and flax. The garment of wool and flax twice. Chad lema'uti mishalosh shalosh. Bechad lema'uti mishlosh shalosh. One is coming to exclude that any other garment cannot become tameh even if it's 3 by 3 finger breadths, and the other time is coming to exclude a 3 by 3 hand breadths of any other garment. Okay, so again we're left with vehabeged. Okay, vehabeged is wool and flax 3 finger breadths, and the kal vachomer teaches us 3 by 3 hand breadths of wool and linen. All right, nothing yet on the other garments. All right, so we've tried, but we've not. So one more time, vehabeged, the extra veha and the is teaching me 3 by 3 finger breadths, and the kal vachomer we learned from Sheti and Erev, the warp and the wolf, right, comes to teach me the 3 hand breadths of wool and linen. Good. So Gemara continues. Ulerava, according to Rava, who said, Shelosha al shlosha bishar begadim ika benayu. If you remember, Rava said there is a difference between Rabbi Shimon and the Tanav Rabbi Ishmael. The difference was 3 by 3 handbreadths of other garments. Okay? That's what it says. Meaning the Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar itle. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar says that 3 by 3 handbreadths of other garments could become tameh. And Letana Rabbi Ishmael leitle, but the Tana Rabbi Ishmael doesn't say, meaning it says they don't become tameh. So the Gemara asks, Shlosha bishar begadim menale nafka. Menale. Where did he learn it from? We just tried all these things to learn it from. Okay, and we never came to a conclusion. We couldn't find an answer where we learned that 3 by 3 tefachim of other garments, silk and polyester, can become tameh. We're only asking now because Rava said that according to Rabbi Shimon, it could become tameh. So where does he learn it from? That's what we're trying to figure out. So here's the Gemara. If it didn't get confusing enough, nafka me, he learns it from o beged. O, the word o beged, comes to teach me that 3 by 3 tefach. Oh, beged. Detanya. Beged enli. Ela beged al shosha. When the pasuk says beged, enli ela beged, it's only talking about a garment of wool or flax, 3 handbreadths by 3 handbreadths. Right? Oh, sorry, enli beged. A garment in the thing. A garment of wool and flax. Shosha al shosha bishar begadim minayin. Where do we know 3 by 3 from all other garments? Talmud Lamad, o beged. From the word o, it teaches me that anything 3 by 3 of other garments is susceptible to tumah. So now remember, there's a machloket between Abaye and Rava. This was Rava's opinion. So whenever you have a machloket, the Gemara now has to say, okay, what does Abaye say that this word o means? Because Abaye said that they're both saying the same thing. If you remember the beginning of the Shiur, Rabbi Shimon and the Tana Rabbi Ishmael are not arguing. They hold the same thing. So only Rava is saying they're arguing. Rabbi Shimon holds that you have this concept of tumah by 3 tefach. So where does he learn it from? So what does Abaye say with the word o? Ve'Abaye hay o beged ma'avid le. When the pasuk says o beged, the word o, what does it come to teach me? So he says, Mi bae le lerabot shalosh al shalosh betzemer upishtim. Dimitame bishratzim. That's coming to teach me that a 3-finger by 3-finger wool and flax can become tameh when it touches a sheretz. A sheretz is an insect, a dead insect. All right, there are different types of shratzim. Okay, we already know 3 by 3, but when it comes with a tzarat, a guy who touches tzarat, but we don't know if 3 by 3 wool or flax can become tameh with sheretz. Now Abaye comes and says, "Oh, beged." When it says "oh," that comes to teach me that even by sheretz it becomes tameh. So now the Gemara goes back to Rava. Okay, Rava, what are you going to answer? Rava, where does he know the law that it can become by sheretz? That the 3 by 3 finger breadths of wool and flax can become by sheretz? So Gemara says, Gali Rachmana Gabe Negaim. Okay? Behu Adin Lishratzim. That HaKadosh Baruch Hu revealed the tum'ah of wool and flax, 3 by 3 fingers with tzarat, that for sure is going to be by sheretz. Okay? Meaning, it's a binyan av. The fact that the Torah revealed 3 by 3 by tzarat, that if a guy who's a metzorah touches 3 by 3 wool or flax finger bread, I can assume that by a sheretz, it's the same thing. It's a binyan av. That's what Rava says. I don't need an extra. That's not the all doesn't come to teach me that. All comes to teach 3 by 3 handbreadths of any other garment, like he said. So ve'abaye. Okay, so Abaye, what do you say to that? Right? What do you say to that? Why do you not agree to that binyan av? So Abaye said, no, ika lemifrach, because you could refute it. You could refute the binyan av, because binyan av only works when they're equal. We're going to see now. But when one of the two factors, either sheretz or negaim, one has a stringency or a leniency, you cannot use a binyan av. So that's what Abaye is going to say. Abaye is going to say there's a stringency here by negaim, by tzarat. Ma negaim sheken shetiva erev mitameh bahem. With regards to tzarat, a tzarat can make tameh a garment that is shetiva erev, the warp and the wolf. It can make that tameh. But sheretz and the sheretz cannot. Okay, the sheretz, a dead insect, which is tameh, cannot make a sheti and erev tameh. So you see, there's a big difference. So you cannot tell me, you cannot learn a binyan av. You cannot compare the two cases of tzarat to sheret, because one has a stringency. The tzarat has a stringency. Okay. So right, so we can't learn the binyan av. Okay, so now we go back to Rava. Rava, look what Abaye says. Abaye says that tzarat has a stringency. So how can you learn the binyan av? How can you say that because it says it by tzarat, it says it by sheret as well? Ve'idach, what would you tell to Rava? So Rava said, no, wait. If you're going to tell me that tzarat is more chamire, is more chamur, is more stringent, then it should have said the other way. Lichtov rachmana gabe shratzim. The law of 3 by 3 fingers by wool and flax should have said it by sheret. Because sheret is more lenient. If you learn it by sheret, for sure you're going to learn it by tzarat. If you're telling me the 3 by 3 finger breadths of wool and flax is tameh by a sheret, by a dead insect, then you don't even have to tell me that it is the same case by tzarat, because tzarat's more stringent, right, Abaye? But it doesn't. It goes the other way. The Torah tells us only by tzarat, so you can't tell me that tzarat is more strict. Okay, so therefore, Rava says all beged still comes to teach me that any other material 3 by 3 handbreadths is tameh, unlike Abaye. So what's Abaye going to answer? Be'idach, what is Abaye going to answer to that? Nega'i mishratzim lo atu, right? That tzarat, the susceptibility to tumah of tzarat cannot be derived from sheret. Why? De'ika lemifrach. Because we can refute that too. Now Abaye is going to say, I'm going to show you something that is more strict by a sheret. Masratzim sheken metameh becha'adasha. A sheret, okay, a carcass of a sheret contaminates only the size of a lentil. That's right. Even if the size of a lentil can contaminate. Mashe'en ken, the tzarat needs the size of a bean. A bean is 9 times the size of a lentil. So we see you need less size for a sheret, which is more strict. So Abaye says, you see, there's a strict side to the tzarat, and there's a strict side to the sheret. And because there's a strict on either side, you cannot learn a binyan av. That's what he says. So therefore, Abaye maintains that all beged, the word all, okay, is needed to teach that a wool in flax of 3 finger breadths by 3 finger breadths is susceptible to sheret. Okay, so in the end, the word all, according to Rava, is teaching me 3 by 3 handbreadths by any other garment. And according to Abaye, the word all comes to teach me 3 by 3 finger breadths of wool and flax by sheret. Okay? Because Abaye says, remember, according to Abaye, they're both saying the same thing, Rabbi Shimon and Tana Rabbi Ishmael, and therefore there's no concept of any other garment that can become tameh, because everything was built on this klal nefrat. In the binyan av, the original binyan av says only wool and flax. Okay, so we're going to stop here, even though that the sugya continues. Okay, it does continue, but I strongly recommend that. We go over this when we get home, because it is difficult and needs review. All right. Yeah, we're going to record it. We're just going to review it outside the whole thing, since we did finish a little bit early today. So we'll. Okay. So Abaye said that the parasha of Tzarat, the parasha of Tzarat wrote not Abaye. Parashat Tzarat wrote begadim, generally, okay? Just beged. Now, then it wrote wool and linen. So we said klal ufrat and bichlal elama shebeprat, meaning whenever you have a general term and a specific term, we always go by a specific term. Therefore, only linen and flax and wool is considered to become tameh. But now we have a binyan av that applies any other time where it says beged, it becomes tameh as well, only to flax and linen. Okay? So, according to Rabbi Shimon, no other material from a tree can become tumah except for flax. Okay. Now, Rava says that Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar and Rabbi Ishmael would argue in a case where you have 3 handbreadths by 3 handbreadths and other types of material. Rabbi Shimon says that 3 by 3 handbreadths of other materials could become tameh, and Rabbi Ishmael says no, because it's excluded. Now, both Rabbi Shimon and Rabbi Ishmael agree that 3 finger breadths by 3 finger breadths of wool and flax could become tameh if they come in contact with sarat. How does he learn that? From the word beged. The fact that he wrote the word beged, okay, beged means a whole garment. Veha beged comes to teach me 3 fingers by 3 fingers of wool and flax. That everyone agrees. Veha, the veha comes 3 fingers and 3 fingers. The Gemara is just going through the process to prove that it can't mean anything else. So first it says, maybe the veha means 3 by 3 handbreadths. So Gemara says, no, 3 handbreadths by 3 handbreadths is learned from a kal vachomer. What's a kal vachomer? Just like sheti and erev can become tameh, so for sure 3 handbreadths by 3 handbreadths can become tameh. The Gemara wanted to question that kal vachomer, and it said, no, wait, why don't you say that if sheti and erev, the warp and the woof become tameh, then maybe 3 by 3 finger breadths. Use that for the kal vachomer, and maybe veha means the hand breadths and not the finger breadths. So the Gemara says, no, you can't say that, because there's a lesser, it's less substantial. The 3 by 3 can only be used by poor people. So it's less significant than the warp and the woof. Even though the warp and the woof isn't really a garment yet, but the 3 by 3 is even less, because it only be used by poor people. So we can only use the kal vachomer to a 3 by 3 hand breadths, because it is a bigger, it's an actual garment. Okay? So, yeah. So, veha beged, again, veha beged is the 3 by 3 fingers, and the kal vachomer teaches the 3 by 3 hand breadths only by wool and linen. Only by wool and linen. Right? So the question says, okay, so now we're trying to go to prove it, to make sure nothing else applies. Maybe the veha comes to teach me 3 by 3 hand breadths of other materials, silk and polyester. Okay? And then yet again, then we can learn the 3 by 3 fingers from the kal vachomer. So he says, no, because the pasuk says, tzemer upishtim, specifically wool and linen. Okay? And nothing else. Wool and linen, nothing else. So Gemara says, okay, maybe when you say nothing else, it means nothing else 3 by 3 fingers. But maybe 3 by 3 hand breadths, yeah, maybe silk and polyester could become tameh, right? So Gemara says, no. We're learning 2 exclusions, because the pasuk says twice, beget tzemer upishtim. Once to exclude other materials 3 by 3 fingers, and the other one to exclude other materials 3 by 3 hand breadths. So we still don't have a proof of any other materials from anywhere in the pasuk, right? So we're still left with veha beged teaches me 3 by 3 fingers wool and flax, and the kal vachomer 3 by 3 hand breadths wool and flax. We still have nothing with the other materials yet. We have no proof from any pasuk from the other materials, which leads us to a question on Rava, because Rava says that according to Rabbi Shimon, there is an isur by other materials. So where does he learn it from? So Rava says, o beged. The word o comes to teach me 3 finger breadths by other garments. That's what he says. All right? Yeah. Sorry. What other garments? Abaye says no. That's only coming. The word all is teaching me 3 by 3 wool and linen by sheretz. That's what the word all comes to teach me, right? Rava says no. Rava says we learn sheretz from tzarat, from binyanav. It already mentioned it by tzarat, so we learn sheretz automatically from binyanav. We don't need all to teach me about sheretz. So Abaye says no. You can't learn that binyanav. You can't compare the two, because tzarat has a stringency. Tzarat, right, can be metameh warp and woof, warp and woof. But sheretz cannot be metameh warp and woof. So you cannot compare the two. You cannot make a binyan. No, Rava says, if you're going to tell me that tzarat is more strict, then the isur of 3 by 3 wool and linen should be mentioned by sheretz. And if it mentions by sheretz, for sure it's going to be the same by tzarat, since it's more strict. The fact that it didn't say that, you can't tell me that tzarat is more strict. So Abaye says, no. you cannot derive it from sheretz either, right? Because sheretz has also a unique stringency, because it's mitameh. Only the size of a lentil contaminates, but by tzarat it needs a bigger size, which is the size of a bean. So we see, since each side has its own stringency, the word all can't be talking about any other material. The word all must be talking about wool and flax, 3 by 3 fingers, with regards to sheretz. That's what Abaye says. And Rava holds that the word all, it only applies, word all comes to teach me 3 by 3 tefach of other materials. All right? So we'll stop there.